I'm John Lorden, and I've been looking into mysterious occurrences since 2015. Joining me today are my friends from uncovered.com.
I'm Rachel Roslet, a forensic psychologist and head of case research and data at Uncovered.
I'm Andrea Cipriano. I'm also a forensic psychologist, and I'm a content specialist at Uncovered.
Welcome back to LordanArts Uncovered. And today, we're revisiting a case that I looked into back in 2017 on my show Brain Scratch Searchlight, but today we're giving it the uncovered.com treatment and going over all the most current info that I haven't been able to review or discuss yet. This is about the unsolved disappearance of 9-year-old Asha Degree. Shelby, affectionately known as the City of Pleasant Living, is located in the southwest portion of North Carolina and is close to the western edge of Charlotte. The community, which lies along the beautiful rolling foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, is home to approximately 22,000 people. The year 2000 began with a great sense of unease as people waited and wondered if computer systems all over the world would crash with the dawn of a new century. Gore and Bush's election campaigns were in full swing, and though neither side knew it yet, they were heading toward the Supreme Court and conversations about hanging chads. Also that year, Tiger Woods would become the youngest player ever to win a Grand Slam in golf. You would think that Valentine's Day in 2000 should have been a fun-filled day for a 9-year-old girl. There were Valentines to exchange with classmates and parties with sweet snacks. For Asha Degree, though, the day would turn out quite differently. For reasons unknown, she would leave her home in the early morning hours of February 14th, 2000, with a packed bag during a thunderstorm. Shelby's sweetheart, a term of affection given to her by the community, has not been seen since. Rachel, Andrea, what do we know about Asha, and how does this timeline come together?
Asha Jaquilla Degree was a fourth grader at nearby Falston Elementary School when she vanished. She was one of two kids born to Harold and Aquila Degree. The family is described as tight-knit. Asha was especially close to her brother O'Brien, who was only 1 year older than her. Iconic pictures of her at the time show Asha pigtailed with a huge smile, clutching a teddy bear.
Asha and her brother led a very sheltered life. School, church, and visits with extended family were priorities for the Degrees. Outside social influences, however, were not. To that end, the Degree family didn't have a computer in the house. Aquila told Jet Magazine in a 2013 interview that, quote, every time you turned on the TV, there was some pedophile who had lured somebody's child away via the internet. Though their rules were strict, her mother indicated that Asha seemed content to follow them.
And Asha was a well-rounded girl. She had interest in both sports and academics, though she was often described as quiet and shy. She did seem to come alive when she was on the basketball court. Friends and family say that she was a passionate point guard, and she really loved the game. Asha was also an excellent student. She had dreams of becoming an illustrator someday, and with her commitment to school and strong grades, it really seemed like the world was her oyster.
So it sounds like the Degrees, we have them very involved in their children's lives, surrounding them with church and family and trying to keep the bad guys away, essentially. And of course, I can understand why you'd want to shelter your kids from all the bad stuff in this world. But even when I was a kid, like if I didn't have access to a computer at home, I'd have access to them at a friend's house. I mean, and back then we were even getting them in school. And this is years before this occurrence. Do you think that limiting electronics is a useful approach to try to handle this very real threat that her mother was concerned about?
Well, as a parent, I think limiting the electronics is a great idea, but you can't prevent your kids from interacting with these devices. I think you need to, in my opinion, my parenting style is that I want to teach them about the dangers that are out there first, so I can also teach them how to deal with them. It feels like if I don't teach them about some of the inherent dangers out there, then they aren't equipped to be able to handle these things when they do inevitably come up.
Mm-hmm. My perspective is a little different. I don't have kids, but growing up, we had a computer in the house. And like you were saying too, John, like we had computers in school. That was just something that was always a part of us. So tech literacy and, being safe online was something that was still really fresh at this time. So I definitely understand the family's concern about not wanting to expose their kids to that. But at the same time, if you're not having those conversations about the dangers of society or the dangers of being online, the problem is the possibility of falling into a rough situation is higher because you just don't know the risks.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, we're not looking to place blame here. This isn't that type of conversation, but when we do review these cases, we're trying to learn from them and how we can apply things that are happening in them to our lives. And let's be honest, 2000s, you didn't quite have the internet in everyone's home. It's nowhere near the proliferation that we have now. I mean, think about how many Wi-Fi connected devices you have in your house. Look at children. I mean, I'm seeing toddlers with tablets. So it's one of those things where that connectivity is going to be there. And these social apps are more social than ever, easier to get connected to people. So there's a lot of these concerns, and I think both you ladies are making great points. You're not going to be able to put a firewall around your child and stop them from all internet communication. And maybe some of those interactions that they have, if they have a good open communication with you, you can guide them through, help them try to understand. Because especially after looking at this case a few times now, there seems to be a real feeling for me personally that there might have been someone in communication with her in some way. It might have not been the internet. It might have been someone around the family structure or the social structure in some way. But it feels like this is a case where she might have been groomed. So
I agree. And we've all been kids, and we know too that if your parent says, no, absolutely, don't go near that, you can't have access to that, it inherently makes it more attractive
right.
To you. And you have to wonder if something like that didn't happen with Asha.
Yeah.
Or, if she didn't even have the practice of stranger danger online, having it in person is not the place you want to have it, because there's all those risks of someone that you trust is actually that stranger danger.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we were being taught that stuff in school years and years before the internet. So yeah, it's a real threat in many more ways than just that. But so let's get back to the review. What happened in the days kind of leading up to Asha's disappearance?
So the weekend before she went missing, it was actually a 3-day weekend for the Degree kids. School was closed on Friday, February the 11th. So they spent the day at their aunt's home, which allowed them to attend their basketball practices. The following day, Asha had a game, and the basketball team lost its first match of the season by only 1 point. And Asha played point guard, but she fouled out. And she was pretty upset by the loss, and her mom and her teammates actually had to calm her down. Minutes later, though, her mom and the coach saw her happy, joking, smiling, and just back to her normal self because she was watching her big brother play during his game.
The next day seemed to begin pretty normally. Asha and her family went to the Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church in Waco, North Carolina. Asha's mom remembers that Asha seemed to be over her upset feelings from the previous day game, and she seemed to be pretty happy all day Sunday. Asha's grandma also remembers her being excited because she received some Valentine's candy that day. So after church, they went to her aunt's house. Asha and her family went to her aunt's house to have lunch, and then they all headed back home.
Later that evening, a severe thunderstorm develops. Asha, who was taking a nap at the time, was afraid of storms, so she went down to watch TV with her family for a bit. Sometime between 8 and 9 p.m., the kids go to bed. At about the same time, the power goes out because of a car accident. And the power was restored around 12:30 a.m., and Harold checks on both of the kids who are asleep in the same room. He does a final check on them at 2:30 in the morning, and he heads to bed.
Yeah, I mean, the things that you're describing, it almost sounds like the start of a horror movie, but these are real events, and somehow all this stuff is just happening on that night in this way. Pretty eventful night for a 9-year-old, and it raises a really interesting question. If she is terrified of storms to the point that she can't sleep through them. She doesn't even want to stay in her room where her brother is. She wants to be with her family. It's hard to imagine that she would then voluntarily leave the house going out into a storm like that.
I agree.
I agree. So what happens next?
Aisha's brother says that he saw his sister get up from her bed at some point. She went to the bathroom and she returned and then got back into her bed. He also says that a little bit later he heard Aisha's bed squeak. He doesn't really pay any attention to that noise, as he just thought his sister was probably moving around while she was sleeping. It is thought that Aisha left her home sometime between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m. She took with her her black book bag, a pair of jeans with a red stripe, black sneakers, a long-sleeved white t-shirt with purple lettering, a red vest with black trim, a black purse with Tweety Bird on it, and a long-sleeve black and white t-shirt.
Other reports also note that she possibly took her house key, photos of family, and her basketball uniform. There are no signs of forced entry, so law enforcement believes that she did leave on her own accord. At first, her family wonders if she ran away because she was upset about the loss of her game. But again, they do find it really hard to believe that Aisha, with her fear of storms and, of course, the dark, that she would actually voluntarily leave on her own.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is troubling about this case is there's so much online conjecture about this particular instance. And in a lot of these cases, quite honestly, we do have to look at, is the family involved in this in some way? We have other sightings of her that really kind of rule that out in this case. But it's also interesting that even her family questions it. Like, why would she have left in the storm? Like, that is just so against her, or against what she would normally do. Many of us as children had fantasies or possibly even attempts about running away. But I mean, even I did that in one case. And basically I just got out and then I was like going around the block, because where do you go when you're a child? Like, even your imagination is really big about that thought. Like, oh, I'm going to run away. I'm not going to live here anymore. I'm going to go live at Toys R Us, or I'm going to go live at Disneyland. Like, your fantasy of what that is very different at that age than if you were going to talk about running away now or something. But that also kind of re-raises that question. Where is a child that age going to go unless it's being facilitated by someone else? And what is that plan that they would dream up? Because I know for me, my imagination would get hold of that thought and, take me to these bizarre places where I'm going to go live at the mall or something silly like that. And that's clearly not what we were having happen here. It seems like this is something that's been engineered in some way.
Yeah. I mean, by all accounts, it seems like the Degrees were very good parents. They loved their children. They took great care of them. They were trying to do right by them. So, for a little girl at 9 to run away, it seems like there was just some sort, if she was doing it spontaneously, you would think there was some sort of conflict. Her mom said, you can't do that. And she was upset and is like, fine, I'm going to run away. And, she gets maybe half a block down the street and comes back. But to just disappear in the middle of the night, it just doesn't seem something that, a 9-year-old, let's face it, she's still a baby at that point, that a 9-year-old would think of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything that you just said, Rachel, resonates with me a lot. When I was around the same age as Aisha, I tried to run away, but the circumstances were different, right? For me, I packed a backpack with granola bars and a pair of pajamas, and I announced it to my mom that, like, I'm running away. And this was in broad daylight. And yeah, I didn't get any further than like 2 houses down before my brother came and grabbed me by my hair and brought me home. So I see that circumstance. For me, I was trying to get attention. I was just being defiant in a situation. Whereas this is totally different, right? She's leaving in the middle of a rough storm. It's super late. And, we do learn that there's just a lot going on. So for her to go without knowing that there's a destination doesn't sit right with me. It feels like she would know that there's an end to her journey, essentially.
Well, and even the time frame of like, I can't imagine when I was 9 o'clock, I'm going to wake up at 3:30 in the morning. Like that just
Right.
wasn't even a thought. Like I didn't get to that mode of I'm going to sneak out in the middle of the night until like my late teens or something. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty far along. But it also speaks to something else. If this was something that was coordinated by an adult, something that they had figured out, was there a reason why they wouldn't have done? To your point, she didn't leave in the middle of the day. Like
Yeah.
this person could have picked her up from school or something. Of course, what's wrong with that is the risk. There's a much higher chance that they're going to be spotted.
Mm-hmm.
So it just really has me concerned about some level of planning, and also this question that is unfortunately kind of dark, but it's happening on Valentine's Day.
Mm.
Like, is
It's
this some
really,
person's
yeah.
sick fantasy, like being brought into reality? I don't know.
But who knows? And maybe he tied it to her, tied it for her to a special day that he knew she would be excited about too. And maybe that was I just can't imagine. Like I'm sitting here wondering what was the compelling reason to get this girl to go against everything that she's afraid of? She was afraid of three things that her mother said: dogs, dark, and thunderstorms. And she went out in the dark in a thunderstorm. What could have drawn her out like that? And we do know that Aisha and Bryant were home alone a good bit of time after they got home from school because both of their parents were working. And so they would have to come home from school and, work on their homework or whatever for a while before her parents got home. So to your point earlier, John, I mean, there were opportunities to grab her during daylight hours, but they didn't for some reason. And it could have been that they didn't want to be seen.
Mm-hmm. And that for me really just indicates that I believe that this is someone that it would be in her circle. So whether it's church, school, basketball, something like that. Because I don't think that for as, sheltered, if you will, as she was, a random stranger telling her, I have a puppy and the only way that you can get it is if you meet me along a highway at 3 a.m. I don't believe she would have gone for that. There has to be a level of safety built into this narrative for her to feel comfortable enough to even leave the house.
Yeah, and the basketball thing just takes me to a place of wondering like who's there watching, and especially with her kind of being a star on her team, like was that something that grabbed their attention? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The main
Well,
thing, yeah,
I think though, I would add that if you're worried about being seen, I mean, I'm sure all criminals are worried about that, but to orchestrate something like this, it feels like that means they would be recognized if they would have abducted her in broad daylight. So that's why they had to do it under the cover of night.
yeah. Well, sounds like there's a chance that they might have been spotted anyway, which we'll be getting to here. But of course, a big concern for all of us, it sounds like, is that she was in communication with someone and there was some type of plan for her to be picked up. And maybe that's part of what plays into her being able to kind of push through these fears of the dark and the storm, because she knows that she's essentially going to be in a car. She's heading out to get to a car very soon.
Yeah, and we seem to have confirmation that she is on foot, at least only for a while. At around 3:45 in the morning, a motorist sees Aisha walking south on NC-18 towards Shelby. He turns his 10-wheeler around to investigate because he's so startled to see a young girl walking alone along the side of a highway at this time of the night. He's not able to make contact with her, though, as she ran off into the woods before he could speak to her. At least one other motorist who sees Aisha walking in the same vicinity about a mile from her house. All reports say that the weather is still bad. It was cold and it was raining really hard. Aisha does not appear to be wearing a coat, hat, scarf, or gloves. Detective Tim Adams said that was the last time anyone had a sighting of her, and it was actually never been confirmed.
Also, just worth noting, by the way she's dressed, obviously, it seems like she's planning on being picked up. Like she's not even dressed to be outside in that kind of weather.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just feeling like, why aren't all of these people calling 911?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then around 6:30, Aisha's parents go to wake up their kids for school. Of course, O'Brien perks up right away, but Aisha is not in her bed. Aquila frantically checks downstairs. She checks in every closet in the house and the cars, and she tells her husband that she doesn't think Aisha is inside that house. Harold says that maybe Aisha could be at her grandparents' house. So Aquila calls her mother in law, who says that Aisha is not there. And as you can imagine, that's when Aquila really begins to panic and she has Harold call 911.
So strange. So do we know if she's seen talking to anyone or possibly getting into a car that night?
Yeah, so several years after she disappeared, and this is about May 2016, so it's more than several years. I'd say it's about 16 years later. The FBI released information that someone claimed to have seen Aisha getting into a car that night. The vehicle is thought to be a Lincoln Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird with rusted wheels. This would probably squash the runaway theory that, she took off because she was upset about her game. Detective Tim Adams said, quote, obviously a 9-year-old, even if they do choose to leave home for whatever reason, for her to have not been found for the last 22 years, someone had to help her. Someone had to have met or planned a meeting, or maybe some stranger came along as she was walking and picked her up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's clear that she was picked up, and I'm kind of leaning towards thinking that this was a plan the whole time. Let's take a look at a map real quick just to get a sense of where she was spotted and where she came from. Her family lives on Oak Crest up here. She came out to Falston Road or the NC 18 and then heads south. And the sightings happened somewhere within this first mile. And there's some.
It's a pretty rural area where she was walking to.
Yeah. If we take a look kind of at a street view of it here, I'd be concerned just to be walking out here at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning myself. Not really a sidewalk in this area. I'm not seeing anything for street lights. There are enough houses that you've probably got a little bit of lighting from building to building that you're going to see, but there's stretches where even the houses kind of thin out. Like, this is pretty bold to think of a 9-year-old just kind of going off in the middle of the night and walking off in this direction like this. And to get where? Like, I was expecting like some kind of town center down here, or like if this was an arranged pickup, what is the location? And we do have a lot of different small businesses and services and a golf club and all this stuff down here. But are you going to expect a 9-year-old to walk? I mean, that's really 2 miles before you start getting into that area. I don't know.
In the middle of the night too. I mean, I'm just in awe of the gumption of this little girl to walk as far as she did in the dark, in the pouring rain.
Yeah.
She was on a mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to know also that she darts into the woods especially when that truck driver turns around, to me, that tells me that she at least knew that not necessarily that what she was doing was wrong, but that if she were found, like, she would be in trouble with her parents. And trying to hide that way, for me, just kind of brings home this idea that she was on a mission and she was going to meet somebody.
It does raise a little question, though. Like, if she's walking down the road in the middle of the night and she's expecting someone to come pick her up, is she going to run away from vehicles? Now, obviously, we're talking about a truck there. So maybe it was a vehicle that she could clearly identify wasn't the one that she was waiting for. And that's why she decided to run away from it.
Or they had a designated spot where they were meeting and she knew where that was.
Right. Yeah. And we know that it's in this little stretch because we do have some items that are kind of found right near this as well. Andre, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So the day after Aisha disappears, which is February 15th, the owner of a nearby upholstery business finds Aisha's pencil, candy wrappers, and a Mickey Mouse bow tie in the doorway of a tool shed on their property. Turner's Upholstery is along NC 18 highway, where Asha was last seen walking by motorists more than 1 mile away from her home. She doesn't initially think that these items have anything to do with Asha's disappearance, though, so the police don't find out about these items until February 17th, 2001.
Yeah, and that's interesting. This is a ways off. I know when we were looking through this case, Rachel, you were talking about a long driveway. Here's a really long driveway. So it does raise a question of, was there some lights? There are some big lights that I can see back here currently. Was there some lighting back here that kind of attracted her to that area? My initial thought was that maybe this is where she went to hide. Like, you know, there was traffic that kept coming around her. She thought that that truck was turning around time and time again to see her, and she was about to get in trouble. So she goes tearing off and just heads for, you know, the closest building she could find to stay in and wait until things cool down, and hopefully that truck drives off. But seeing the distance on this, it does have me wondering, because there's other structures that are way closer to the road that, you know, you could hide behind this house or go hide in the woods right around behind this house.
I mean, she could have taken shelter in the woods. Not that it would have stopped all the rain, but certainly there are enough trees that it would have tempered the rain coming down, and she could have just bundled up. But yeah, to go way back there.
To this shed, I think I've seen photos of it. This looks like the shed.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a bit of a ways out there. And something else is found out there that is announced as well in this article from the Charlotte Observer from the 24th of February, 2000. That is not Asha in this picture, but they're asking, do you know who this girl is? Basically, this photo was found with her stuff in that shed. And Asha's family doesn't recognize the girl in the photo, and officials at Asha's school also don't recognize the girl in this photo. That could be important if this location does actually turn out to be the pickup spot. If the person that was coordinating all this said, get to this shed, I'll meet you there. Because then this item might have not been Asha's. It could have been that it was on that person and somehow got dropped when they came out and met with her, something like that.
Or if she was being groomed, you know, I don't know how she would have gotten that picture, but could that be who she thought she was talking to if she was conversing with someone online? That also has crossed my mind. And that's who she thought she was going to meet.
Wow.
I mean, it's all the thoughts, right? Regardless of how that picture got there, all the thoughts are not good of what that could mean.
Right. And it really seems like someone's manipulating things here.
All
right, Rachel, let us know what happens next.
Yeah, so in August of 2001, Asha's black and beige backpack, which had her name and her telephone number written on it, was found by a construction worker who was digging an access road for a new home in Burke County. The backpack was buried, and it was found less than 50 yards off NC 18, which was the highway that she was last seen on. That said, this location is about almost 30 miles away from her house. It's like 26 miles away from her home. So that's pretty far. The bag is double wrapped in black plastic trash bags. And it also has a New Kids on the Block t-shirt and McElligot's Pool by Dr. Seuss. These two items, as far as we know, did not belong to Asha.
Unfortunately, the public is not told about the contents of Asha's backpack until 17 years later on October 8th, 2018. Asha's bag is sent to a federal laboratory in Quantico, Virginia for testing, but the results are never released. Media sources say that the book bag was found near the home of a convicted sex offender, but police never found evidence linking him to Asha's disappearance. Police searched the surrounding area, but also didn't find any additional evidence.
This is really not sounding good. And when I heard about this information for the first time, my biggest fear is that this is some kind of trophy stash. especially looking at items that don't belong to her that are found with her bag, which obviously does. And the fact that this stuff was double wrapped in plastic. Like if you were trying to get rid of evidence that you thought could link you back to a crime, are you essentially going to preserve that evidence by putting it in double wrapped plastic in a place where it could be found? Because obviously it does get found at some point. Or would you maybe throw those items out, burn them, destroy them? Like there's just something about the intent of burying these things in plastic that in my mind speaks to the person that did that either wanted to really go back and collect them at some point, or just the fantasy of I know where they are and I can go back and visit them anytime. So yeah, it really bothers me.
I had other theories about what that shirt and book meant, but honestly, the trophy aspect of it, like it makes my stomach drop, but it also makes so much sense that I can't even remember the other theories I have, because you're right. Why would you preserve this evidence? There's no other reason unless you're going to come back for it at some point.
Right. I think for me, when I first learned that it's her backpack, but the contents are not hers, I mean, that's why I really think that the book and the shirt are going to be the key to finding this person. I wonder if, going back to this idea of, we know that her social circle was small. So if it's someone at a basketball game, it's another parent, or a teacher or somebody at church, having these items could be just indicative that maybe they themselves have a younger girl and they were friends. Just something in that nature, I think shows that the circle is super small.
Yeah, and I know it said that the backpack was sent to Quantico for testing. I would have to imagine they also sent the other items, because even though you don't have them directly connected to our victim here, they could potentially be other victims, or to your point, Andrea, they could potentially be connected to family members of the person that has done this. So just understanding the linkage of those items and who they're connected to could really bring some big insight into this case. And I actually ran into an interesting fact that kind of throws this. And honestly, when you're talking about someone being in the circle of kind of the basketball family, let's call it, this fact might actually point into that possibility a little more strongly. This is from the Shelby Star. The book appears to have been checked out from Falston Elementary Media Center. So the book seems to have come from that school's library, but their records don't date back 18 years, so they can't tell who checked it out. Now, that has me wondering two things. First of all, is it possible that Asha did check this out and they just don't know because they don't have the records, and that it was actually an item that she had with her? Maybe she had just checked it out from school. She kept it. I mean, it is her book bag that she's taken along with her. Maybe her family just didn't know that she had that bag. I don't know. Like, I don't have children, but Rachel, isn't 9 years old a little out of the age range for Dr. Seuss?
I would think so, but he's so iconic, and his books have so many layered meanings in them.
Yeah,
I could see, even as you get older, that you're still connected to those books. But yeah, I don't know. And of course, I think back to her dream as an illustrator too, and Dr. Seuss books have such great illustrations in there. That could also be what appealed to her if that was this book.
that's
The only other thing I could think of is, and this literally just reminded me of this, we used to celebrate Read Across America Day. I just looked up the date. It's March 2nd. So it's a little further away, but it's also Dr. Seuss's birthday. So I remember in elementary school, like we would, read the books and all that stuff. So she's definitely on the outer edge of the age range for it, but maybe it was something that the school was doing.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So I mean, I think it's a possibility. It's interesting to me that, especially with that fact that, oh, by the way, it's from her school. A lot of the other media that's been put out about it is just so clear that this was not Aisha's book. It's like, yeah, well, it belongs to the library, but it's feasible that it came from her school, that, maybe she's the one that checked it out, or maybe a friend of hers checked it out. She borrowed it from them. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that could happen to a library book. But how does it wind up there as part of this? And then especially with a shirt that is not hers, her family doesn't recognize. We've been trying to analyze this because it looks like a concert shirt on appearance, but I think it's a mock concert shirt. I think it's made for sale in stores. It says concert tonight. It doesn't have an actual date on it. It says main arena. Main arena is just a generic term that I don't, if you guys are aware of there actually being a place called Main Arena in this area, please tell us in the comments, because I'm not aware of that. 7 p.m. The concert tonight at 7 p.m. It seems like this is a generic shirt that was made for retail. But if you guys have some more insight on that, please share it with us.
The other thing that's really bothering me is they're heading right up NC 18, which is a highway, and all of the things are being found along this highway. And it really just makes me wonder if it's not someone, especially because we have a picture potentially of a girl that no one knows who it is. It makes me wonder if the person that abducted Asha isn't someone who does a lot of traveling, uses that highway. They buried that stuff there because they travel up and down that highway all the time. So that's just niggling around in the back of my head.
Yeah. So where does this case stand today?
Law enforcement has been actively working the case. Several tips have come in throughout the years that give hope that her case may someday be solved. So in 2004, a prisoner gave police a tip that led them to dig near Lawndale, South Carolina, at the corner of Shelby and Rube Spangler Roads. They found bones, which turned out to actually belong to an animal. They also found a pair of men's khaki trousers. And the dig site is it's only 6 miles from Asha's home.
In 2010, another prisoner claimed involvement in Asha's case, but that really didn't lead to any new breaks or any new information. 5 years later, so around 2015, the Cleveland Sheriff's Office, the FBI, and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation all joined together to do a top to bottom re-examination of a case. And that generates a total of 350 leads, 45 of which then were developed within that year.
So the case got another fresh look 5 years ago by the Child Abduction Rapid Deployment, or otherwise known as the CARD team, which it didn't exist back in 2000. So the CARD team consists of bureau personnel from across the country who are experts at working child abduction cases, and they act as a resource for state and local law enforcement. So when the CARD team gets this case file, they break it down, they get rid of suspects, and they narrow the investigation's focus. So they were deployed to review Asha's case.
The most recent tip that we know about came from a third prison inmate. His name was Marcus Mellon, and he was an inmate at the Alexander Correctional Facility. He actually wrote a letter to the Star of Shelby saying that he found out that Asha was killed and taken to be buried, and that he knows how she was killed and where to find her. However, when they did interviews with him and some other inmates, they really couldn't develop any legitimate leads based on that tip.
Yeah, I almost just want to say, inmates, knock it off with this case. Like, I mean, I get that, you know, people are looking for a benefit, maybe looking to trim a couple years off their sentence, or possibly even just looking for attention. It's kind of interesting to me that this one decides, oh, I'm going to reach out to the paper and send them a letter. Oh, I know what actually happened here.
Right. And that tip actually hung out there a while too, because it was during COVID.
Yeah.
So they couldn't go and interview him right away. So I think it probably really gave people some hope.
Yeah. I almost wish that media would be a little more careful with those types of sources. Like, you know, pass it on, get it to law enforcement, let them process it out, but maybe not report on that necessarily, because so often, like, how many times do I think I certainly hear about it more often that the inmate tipsters information does not pan out. And maybe to the tune of 3 out of 4 times it doesn't pan out.
I believe you're right. I'm also, you know, this has been one of the really surprising things to me. I'm also surprised at how many people claim to or confess to killing.
Oh, yeah.
Or We covered Nancy Eagleson's case. Literally, at least 5 or 6 people have confessed to murdering a 14-year-old girl. It boggles my mind. Like, I would in no way want to be associated with that. But we have people confessing left and right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, it has been over 20 years since Asha went missing. She would be 32 years old today. Her parents and brother, they're still waiting for answers. Her mother, Aquila, told WSOC TV that I can't give up hope, and I won't give up hope. After 20 years, I still believe my daughter is alive. I do not believe she is dead. And I know someone knows something. I'm not crazy enough to think that a 9-year-old can disappear into thin air without somebody knowing something. From the original coverage that I did on this case back in 2017, I also understand that Valentine's Day is also her parents' anniversary. So I imagine they have a lot of tough emotions to process when that day rolls around year after year, over 20 times at this point. But if you have any information about the disappearance of Asha Degree, please contact the FBI at 704-672-6100 or the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office at 704-484-4822. Please also share this video with any acquaintances that you have that live in the North Carolina area and become part of the team that is still looking for justice, still looking for Asha Degree.
If you're looking for a space to meet like-minded true crime enthusiasts and advocates while also engaging in case discussions, look no further than the Uncovered community.
There, you can attend live webinars presented by experts. We even have a space in the community completely dedicated to this series with John Lordan, where we discuss all the cases we've covered in each episode. Regardless of whether you join our community or not, you still have access to the Uncovered database, where you can see all of our sources and a full timeline about Asha's case. If you want to support Uncovered in another way, we also have a merch sale running, and you can find the link in the description box below.
Thank you to The Charlie Project, The Shelby Star, WBTV, Jet Magazine, WPDE, the FBI, WSOC, The Charlotte Observer, WFMY, The News Observer, WCNC, All That's Interesting, and Wikipedia for information on today's case. Also, a huge thank you to my friends at uncovered.com and co-hosts on today's show, Rachel Rosalette and Andrea Cipriano. Please join us again in 2 weeks as we look into another mystery that deserves to be uncovered.